Welcome, everyone. I'm Harry Zimmerman, Stan's son, the firstborn. I hope I can do this almost as well as Dad. A pope and a lawyer die, go to heaven. St. Peter greets them at the pearly gates. He says, "Welcome to heaven." And the pope and the lawyer said, "Thank you, St. Peter. We're both very, very happy to be here, very thrilled." He says, "Let me lead you both to where you'll be spending eternity." So the pope and the lawyer follow him through the pearly gates, St. Peter, and they stop at the first cloud. And he says to the lawyer, "This is where you'll be spending eternity. And it's a huge palatial estate. Ferrari and a Bentley in the driveway, 2 swimming pools, basketball court, tennis court, 15 bedrooms." And the lawyer says, "Thank you, St. Peter. I'm thrilled to be here in heaven." St. Peter turns to the Pope and says, "Let me show you where you'll be spending eternity." And he leads the Pope to this other cloud next door, where there's this very austere shack. The John facilities, as our dad would say, are outside. There's a horse and a buggy in the driveway. The mattress is threadbare. No running water, no electricity. And St. Peter says to the Pope, "This is where you'll be spending eternity." And he starts to walk away. And the Pope goes off to St. Peter, grabs him by the shoulder and says, "Excuse me, listen, it's not that I'm complaining. I've been a man of God, I've served God all my life, and I see you've given this lawyer this incredibly palatial estate, with the cars and the tennis courts, and while I'm very happy to be here, you've given me this rundown shack, and I just wanted to ask you, did I do anything wrong? What's going on?" And St. Peter puts his hand on the Pope's shoulder and says, "Listen, we've had many popes here in heaven. You're our first lawyer." This is one of Dad's favorite jokes. He treated joke telling as a presentation, an intricate story, a colorful, lively yarn. He was able to bring his audience within the realm of the joke. I hope one way we can remember my dad is as a master joke teller. I think he would have liked that. Stanley R. Zimmerman was born in the Bronx, New York on February 17th, 1928. He was son to Sylvia and Herschel. He was brother to Ruth, husband to Stephanie, friends to the employees and residents of Pacific Park Plaza where he lived, landlord to son, boyfriend to Carol, fellow Raiders fan to Violator and Skullman, and he was dad to Sarah and I. My relationship with Stanley Zimmerman was unique and different compared with all your relationships with him, since you're all attending the celebration of his life today. That means that you were special to him in some unique way, and you're also special to my sister and I for being here and supporting us. Grief doesn't always have to be thought of as a bad thing. How we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life, wouldn't you agree? Grief is part of the healing process. In our collective grief over his passing, it's about how we comfort ourselves and each other with our memories of him. I have some very specific memories that will last with me until the day I go. There are certain specific scenes, as I like to say, that have stuck with me over the years. I'd love to share a few with you. I was a young boy who coveted the G.I. Joe Secret of the Mummy's Tomb playset. I'd seen a couple of my friends receive it at birthday parties. I had studied it fanatically at Toys R Us. I knew the large, distinctive square shape of the box. I was obsessed. It was my Red Ryder BB gun, if we have any Christmas Story movie fans. My hopes were fading on this particular 8th night of Hanukkah. My sister and I had already received gifts, and Dad said that's it until next year. He went down the dark hallway of our house. I trudged to my room when I saw him exit our parents' bedroom with a huge wrapped box, which could only contain one particular item. I remember leaping up at that box, I was a little smaller then, over and over as my dad held it above his head tauntingly with that smile on his face. Like his joke telling, there was well thought out presentation here, and he knew what the gift meant to me. If there was ever a more assured sign of a father's love. It's either to his credit or his fault that I inherited his passion for sports and became an Oakland Raiders fan, an Oakland A's fan, and a Golden State Warriors fan. You could say we lived at the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum and Arena when I was a boy. The A's had a 3-year World Series run in the early 70s, and he took me to those games. I think Mom dropped me off at Home Yardage, the fabric store he used to own, so I could meet him for a World Series game this particular night. I was super excited for the game. Now, it should be mentioned I was probably about 8 or 9 years old at this point, and BART was being built. My entire youth was devoted to all things Raiders, A's, Godzilla, and trains. I collected every article in the Oakland Tribune about BART's construction that I could find. I strained my neck out of the car to look at the tracks anytime my mom drove by them. I was obsessed with BART, and I couldn't wait to write it. Getting back to the story, on the way to the Coliseum with Dad, for some reason, we got out of the car somewhere in downtown Oakland and started walking along the city streets. I asked Dad where we were going. He pointed down the shiny new steps of the underground BART station at 19th Street, and he said, "We're going down there, son." My eyes bugged out of my head, going to an A's World Series game and my first ride on BART all in the same night. It was too much. Once again, this almost theatrical side of my dad, which surfaces when he's doing something special for someone, the showman Stanley, it was a moment I'll never forget. I mentioned this memory to him as he was laying in bed at hospice, although he couldn't verbally respond. He smiled at me warmly. He remembered it well too. I know he remembered my reaction. I recall the night I went away for college. My folks were divorced by this time, but thankfully for my sister and I, they remained friendly and cordial to each other, a real testament to both of them. He must have been at the house to say goodbye, and I'll never forget this, about the only time in my life I saw him break down and cry as he shook my hand. He said, "Goodbye, son." He left quickly, not wanting us to see the display of emotion. That moment really packed a wallet. Remember that my dad was a man born of the Depression, a self-made man from nothing who had to fight and claw his way to success in an extremely tough business. Coming from a period when men were not given to expressing their emotions made the moment more significant as I felt his love for me. While my mom is usually credited with where I got my creative side, my left brain side, as I look back, I realize my father contributed too in ways I only realize upon recent reflection. After the divorce, my main interaction with my dad was once every week or so for a movie and dinner. As it turns out, just by the sheer nature of having seen so many movies with him, some of the most formidable cinematic moments in my life were spent with my dad. Sure, it was 2001: A Space Odyssey, which my mom took me to as a little kid, that put my brain in alignment with the fascination of film. But I first saw Star Wars with my dad, and that was the one that made me consider film as a career. If you recall the film, the moment when Luke's caretaker, his Uncle Owen, is bargaining with the Jawas, these little creatures that sell his family some droid robots. One of the droids blows up immediately following the transaction, and Luke's Uncle Owen turns to one of the little Jawas and explains, "Hey, what are you trying to pull on us?" The Jawa held out his arms as if to say, "Who, me?" in an alien dialect. I remember my dad next to me laugh at this, because he saw a scene that could have been between two ragmen, schmata dealers, arguing. It didn't matter to him that this business transaction argument took place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. He took me to see the original Alien and Rocky. I'll never forget after Rocky, when we were in the car driving back home to Mom's house, he took the time to explain to me Rocky's character, that despite the fact that he was a collections guy, a tough guy in the beginning of the movie for a loan shark, that he wasn't a bad man, and that hard work got him his shot at the champ. Little did I realize those talks after movies would be repeated years later in my cinema classes at USC, deconstructing films we had seen and examining them scene by scene to unravel their meaning and structure. I like to think the little analyses I had with my dad in some subconscious way prepared me for the type of story breakdown in film school years later. It's no secret my dad was a shrewd and tough businessman, and let's just say nicely, wasn't opposed to saving the proverbial penny every single day of his life. My dear old friend from high school, Marty Zimmerman, no relation, but we are blood brothers. And I always like to share, pardon me, but cheap Jewish old man stories of our fathers. It was meant out of love and not mean-spirited. Usually after sharing dad comparisons of our father's thriftiness, Marty would often say, "Okay, Harry, you win." On that subject, his stamina for going to football games with me in later years was directly proportional to his hate for certain opponents. In my alma mater's USC's case, that hated rival was Notre Dame. The last time we went to a game together had to be about 3 years ago. It was pouring rain. We got off the metro train near the LA Coliseum, and I immediately felt bad for him. He couldn't walk fast even then. So as we slogged through the rain, he got pretty wet. I was doing fine in my high-tech rain gear, but his was less than optimal. I think he even had shorts on underneath his rain pants. We got there early, as we like to do, and we paused by a tent at a very elaborate tailgate party. A lady inside the party tent, saw my dad and must have taken pity on him as she invited us inside to get dry and watch one of the early games Dad was interested in on their satellite TV. He sat down on their sofa. 45 minutes had passed, and I finally informed him, "Dad, it's time to go. We have to walk to our game." He slowly got up, padded over to their bountiful tailgate food setup, got a plate, loaded it up with food until it was brimming over the edge, looked at me from underneath his rain hood, smiled that cat ate the canary smile of his, and said, "Okay, son, let's go." I was mortified, of course. Now, this was a Stanley Zimmerman stereotype, but there is a side of my dad that I got to know only gradually over the years, and more most recently. He donated generously to the Weizmann Institute of Israel and to Shir Zedek Hospital in Jerusalem as well. I went on a trip with him hosted by the Weizmann up the Danube River. If anyone wants to hear about my bar mitzvah in Jerusalem, hit me up later. I must wrap this up soon. He's helped out a few of his select close friends that I had no idea about. He's allowed some of his residential tenants more time to pay their rent to him. And my sister has been reading me notes from his commercial tenants who, upon hearing of his cancer, reached out to Sari to say the most heartwarming things about him, about our dad. Some of the letters refer to my dad as helping tenants out with advice about their businesses, a passion of his, and other affairs. To hear that now melts my heart. It also makes me think that no matter how well you think you know someone, even your own father, you still may learn things that surprise you. I wanted to go into a few specific memories here, but I'll let my sister tell the story of him stealing a fork from the restaurant after her Georgetown graduation celebration dinner with the whole family present, if she wants to. I don't want to press my luck anymore with the captive audience. Speaking of my sister Sarah, I want to say a very special thanks to her, who sacrificed so much time from work, time with her husband Jeff, time from her famous cheese parties, to care for our dad, to be his dedicated advocate since his diagnosis. Her tireless research into his rare condition made some of his doctors remark that they thought she was a doctor too. I can't express my thanks enough to you, sis. You were truly remarkable during this time, and I know Dad appreciated it by the way he smiled at her and held her hand until the end. I want to thank my bro-in-law, Jeff, for all his hospital and hospice visits and love for my dad. I want to thank Carol for her love and all the time she was there with us too. I want to thank all my friends who checked in on me, and I want to thank Leslie Zimmerman, my friend Marty's sister, who drove Dad to an appointment and who visited him in the hospital and hospice many times, and everyone who visited him either in person or in spirit. I want to thank the staff at Pacific Park Plaza who went above and beyond looking after him. I also want to thank my mom for her enduring support and love during this time. It meant so much. I want to thank all the doctors and nurses at Kaiser and Bruns House, nurses and volunteers who cared for him. I will miss my dad more than words can say. His intellect, wit, humor, goodwill, will be missed by us all. He took care of our family, providing everything we needed and more. He provided college education for my sister and I. We didn't always agree on everything, and even now, as I look back and probably realize his approval meant more to me than I realized at the time. I thank you all for showing up today. He didn't want a service, but my sister and I agreed on this celebration of life. As Siri rightfully noted, that this type of thing is more for the living than the dead. Your presence here demonstrates a certain level of caring that means so much to Dad's immediate family in this unbelievably perplexing time of how to navigate life without his presence. But as I say to others who have experienced this type of similar loss, he will always be kept alive in our fond memories of him. I have many. I hope that by sharing some of mine, his legacy will hold a small corner in your hearts as well. I know it's going to hit me hard the next time the Raiders or USC Trojans win a close game, and I'll want to reach for that phone for our traditional post-game call to hear my dad's exhausted voice on the other end of the line say, "I can't take many more games like this, son." I guess now I'll have to do it on my own. Those of us closest to him will be scattering his ashes in the bay tomorrow. Contrary to Jewish tradition, he wanted to be cremated. So one could say, from the autumn wind to the summer wind, let it be stated that Stanley Zimmerman did it his way. I'll close by quoting my dad's hero, Frank Sinatra. I searched through many of his colorful quotes through the years, but I felt this humble one best represents my dad. Quote, "I'm not one of those complicated, mixed-up cats. I'm not looking for the secret to life. I just go on from day to day, taking what comes." Thank you all for listening, and love to you all. And now, Siri, are you okay to my sister? Carrie Heyman. You okay? You want to do this now?
Yeah.
Okay.
We told my dad in hospice that he would always be with us, and if I even second guessed myself about whether he was really with us, you just had to listen to the words of my brother, because he would have been really proud.
Thanks, sis.
Thank you. And I'm so happy to have so many of you here to celebrate Dad's life. Because we're stubborn and we take after him, we had to disregard his wishes and not have his service. We used to argue about who's the most stubborn. We'll still argue. I'm still talking to him, by the way, so if you just hear me refer to him, it's because he is here. Harry has some memories. I wanted to help us all try to understand Dad, because I think I've spent my life trying to understand my father. And to try to understand my dad, you have to know something about his history. He and his older sister Ruth were the first generation of the family born in the United States. His parents, Harry Herschel Zimmerman and Sylvia Korn, came to this country fleeing pogroms and poverty in Russia. They settled in the Bronx and raised my father and my aunt. My father would talk with so much pride about how hard his own father worked to bring his own parents, my grandparents, and his brothers and sisters out to this country. He also spoke with so much pride about his mother, how smart she was, and how she had educational accomplishments unusual for a woman of her time. Life was very hard growing up and living through the Depression. Dad would tell us a story about how the landlord would come to the door for the rent, and everyone would have to stay quiet so that the landlord wouldn't think that anyone was at home. He held jobs from a very young age to help support the family, As a teenager, he was a stalker and Bonnet teller, but he was a very classic city Bronx boy. One summer, he was sent upstate to work on a farm, and he enraged the farmer because he hoed up an entire row of tomato plants, thinking they were weeds. Later, he went to the Catskills to work. He lived in a dorm, just like in the movie Dirty Dancing, if you've ever seen that. And he even saw a young Jerry Lewis, as well as his father, perform. His family attended a conservative shul, and he would tell us that the rabbi would rap the boys on the knuckles when they were misbehaving, which I think my father may have done quite a lot. He started college at Syracuse University, although he didn't really say. I got the sense that my parents felt the need to get him out of town. Once he told me that he was spending a lot of time hanging out in pool halls, and there was this great 8mm movie, which we still haven't been able to find, going through Dad's stuff, of him as a teenager pacing up and down what was probably the Grand Concourse in jeans and a white t-shirt rolled up over a pack of cigarettes, looking just like a young tough straight out of West Side Story. 2 years after starting college, he enlisted. He was sent to Japan in 1946. His mother said that going away would kill her, and she passed away while he was on the transport ship headed there. So after a short stint at Camp Stoneman as an MP, he was sent home and he finished college at NYU. Working in the garment district after the war, he made the decision to return to California, and he told this story about how he confided this to this mafia heavy who would come to the garment district to collect the vig. And he told this guy that he was moving to California, and Dad said this guy's hands were as big as tennis rackets. And the mafia heavy was really surprised, and he said, "Oh, Stanley, what you want to do that for? They're all Indians out there." He came to San Francisco despite that advice, built a business, married my mom, and raised a family. I don't actually remember him home a lot. We used to joke that he was really in the CIA because he worked such long hours, and then he went to law school at night. But I do have some very specific memories of our time. He would use the biggest bowl to eat ice cream, and he loved his pizza pies, as he called them. When he wasn't home, his head was generally buried in a law book. Dad was a lifelong learner. Even before he died, he was taking an online course in the Federalist Papers, and he quoted Thomas Jefferson to his doctor in hospice. When I was in law school, Dad successfully defended himself in an eminent domain case against the state of California. I think he was having the time of his life. Big boxes stacked up to the ceiling. He did share some snippets of early life in San Francisco, drinks at Ernie's, sitting at the bar with Herb Cain, hanging out at the Shanghai Low and the Non-UN with Mom Chung, who took him to his first opera, and Dolly G. It was this charming, charismatic side to my dad. He was a very complex man. His life experience made him fierce and strong, but whenever he was with a dog, large or small, he'd show this sweet, gentle side. And they all adored him, from our Dobies, Cappy and Coco, to our Chihuahua Velvet, who would sit on his shoulder. A true member of the silent generation. He was deeply private, but he loved to flirt with women. And he idolized Frank Sinatra. He was an amazing storyteller, and here he has already told one of his favorite jokes about the Pope and Lawyer go to heaven at the same time. He told it regularly. He was very consistent in the retelling. He even shared it with his doctors and nurses in the hospital. And as I already said, he loved his parents, and he was very proud when he got to donate to Sherry Zadek and to the Weitzman Institute. He had very high expectations for his children, and our relationship for some years was strained. We were having an argument once, and he told me, "My father never told me that he loved me, but I always knew he did." And I always knew my father did love me. Several years later, when I was in Scotland and very homesick, he came to visit me after a trip to Israel, and I really remember that well. Dad never shied from a fight, but he is remembered by many who told me how much he helped them when they were in need. He fought cancer like a warrior, uncomplaining, although he did once admit to me that this cancer is a pain in the butt. A Kaiser ombudswoman who's here today called me when Dad was in hospice and commented on how he'd greet her so warmly when he came for treatment and how inspired she was by the grace he showed during the whole experience. After a 10-hour surgery, he came out of the anesthesia in record time. Harry started playing Frank Sinatra and he started tapping his toe. It just amazed the surgeon. He'd flirt outrageously with the nurses, kiss their hands, even during his last hospital stay. I watched him once get a whole series of very painful injections without a flinch, and then insist on going to Costco where he'd cruise the aisles for free food. He'd load up on vodka. And he told me when we were headed out, oh, I'm just going to write off a third of this for business expenses. Please don't tell our accountant, he couldn't be here today. He loved the poet Robert Service and he could recite long sections of the Coronation of Bobby McGee. But his favorite poem was The Men That Don't Fit In. I think the poem sums up the complexity of my dad because I think in some ways he identified with both types of men described in the poem. I'd like to share it with you if I can. The men that don't fit in. There's a race of men that don't fit in, a race that can't stand still. So they break the hearts of kith and kin, and they roam the world at will. They range the field, and they rove the flood, and they climb the mountain's crest. Theirs is the curse of the gypsy blood, and they don't know how to rest. If they just went straight, they might go far. They are strong and brave and true, but they're always tired of the things that are, and they want the strange and new. They say, could I find my proper groove, what a deep mark I would make. So they chop and change, and each fresh move is only a fresh mistake. And each forgets as he strips and runs with a brilliant, fitful pace. It's the steady, quiet, plodding ones who win the lifelong race. And each forgets that his youth has fled, forgets that his prime is past, till he stands one day with a hope that's dead in the glare of the truth at last. He has failed, he has failed, he has missed his chance. He has just done things by half. Life's been a jolly good joke on him, and now is the time to laugh, ha ha. He is one of the Legion lost. He was never meant to win. He is a rolling stone, and it's bred in the bone. He's a man who won't fit in. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Great job. And again, thank you to all of you who traveled, some of you very long distances to be here. It means so much to us, really. And now Carol would like to come up and say a few words about my dad. Thank you.
As we've all said, thank you all for being here. Sarah, you just got me. Stan and I met at an APAC conference in Washington, D.C. almost 10 years ago. It was actually the APAC staff who made the shit up and gave him my phone number. And he called me and we met for coffee. He certainly learned of my other Zimmerman family connections and always said how much he thought of Arthur Zimmerman, one of my sweethearts. We developed a wonderful, respectful, and loving relationship. I was very involved in my business as well as in the Jewish community in San Francisco, and he had his business in Jewish engagements in the Bay Area as well. That respect of time and commitment enabled our relationship to develop with a mutual consideration of each other's passions, boring but very educational talk shows, Fox TV, sports teams that were not my teams, all your teams. He embraced my children and grandchildren fully and enjoyed entertaining them and my good friend Betty's grandchildren, often. My oldest grandson, Spencer, recently visited Stan and had been so previously moved by his quoting of Robert Service's writing that Sari recited that he encouraged Stan to recite it again for him, which he did. My grandson has used this as a guidance tool for some of his friends to help them on their career journey. It made an incredible impression on him. We enjoyed lots of fun times together, even though I made him get dressed up sometimes for events and galas. But trips to Cabo, Tahoe, and Sonoma were always special. He always counseled me in my business and personal life to be frugal and cautious. His respect of where he came from, what he had built, and his wonderful children and their hobbies and successes were most important in his life. He was stoic and pragmatic to the end. He was truly the strongest man I've ever known. And he never missed seeing and telling me about the pretty women he saw on the Kaiser and Emerald shows.
Thank you, Carol. Along the lines of his flirting, noticed that my sister and brother-in-law and I had these scissor tie clips, which are significant because they were his. And because he was a ragman in the schmata business, he wore these at work at his fabric store in the Bay Area, his stores. And he did say to me, he said, "Son, you know, ladies will always comment on this tie clip." I believe, good friends Don and Will from high school are here also, I believe, Don, you told me once that you, without having met my dad before, were able to identify him at some sort of high school get-together because he had the tie clip on and you recognized it in me. So, anyway, we have drinks and food, and we're going to have a little slideshow that's about 7 or 8 minutes long. But first, if anyone would like to, no pressure, but if anyone would like to get up and say any remembrance, embarrassing story of our dad, we really encourage those. Feel free. If anyone would like to say anything, yeah. If everyone could just, when they come up, just please introduce yourself and just say how you know our father.
Yes. Hello, I'm Janice Weitz. I am Carol Weitz's daughter-in-law, and I'm actually going to read something from my sister-in-law because she and her husband Howie couldn't be here today, and she asked me to read this, please. Dear Stan, the first thing I remember when I think of you is your voice. I'll never forget the lively, jocular hellos we'd get and how you jump right into inquiring about how we are doing, or teasing us about silly things, or remembering to question us about important matters in our life. We quickly learned to always have vodka on hand and a well chilled for the cocktail hour. We had great discussions over many dinners. Some conversations became quite animated when the topic turned to politics. But many times we listened intently to great stories from another era, or you're educating us on business matters and Wall Street. Sometimes I'd see that twinkle in those blue eyes and think to myself, you must have been quite the ladies' man in your heyday. You never looked your age, and from the moment I met you, I swear you were a decade younger. Our stepmom, Carol, shared a special friendship with you, neither of you needing to define it any more than that. Yet the nature of that friendship changed over the years. As you both got older, we saw how you grew to care and support one another after surgeries and during treatment. The friendship became a family ship. Stan, it was reassuring to know that you were always there for Carol. In fact, my bet is you're popping in on her often or watching over her from above to make sure she's okay. We're so sorry we can't be here today, but we want to extend our most heartfelt condolences to all of Stan's dear family and friends. Love, Susie and Howie.
Thank you. That was beautiful. If anyone else, please.
My name is Harley Schultz, and I met Stan in 1991 on a trip to Israel. It was right after the first Bush War, and they had Scuds landing in Israel. And the tourist industry was pretty quiet. This was the first large trip of tourists going to Israel. There were about 350 of us on a quote mission, and we were the first large group to go back to Israel. My wife had 2 little ones, so I was told if we want to go, go, adios. And I was fortunate because Stan was my roommate for that trip. And I have to tell you, it was a great trip in large part because of Stan. Stan is one of those guys, when I think of him, I just have to smile. We had more fun and more laughs than I can recount. But Stan was also a guy, as you might gather, who did not have a lot of pretense, and he did not suffer airs well. And we had some people there who pretended to be art connoisseurs, which led us to this museum in Tel Aviv, where the big exhibit was basically a bunch of stuff on the floor that looked like it was someone's garage. And Stan looked at me and I looked at Stan, and it's like, what the heck is this? This is art. And so I asked the docent, can you kindly explain the meaning of this collection of junk and whatever? And the answer was something like, well, art is in the eyes of the beholder. And I looked at Stan and he looked at me. We both burst out laughing, fell on the floor. And then we had a rather artsy-fartsy woman on the trip. And so we asked her at night, because she would lecture everybody on the meaning of art. I said, what did you think of that piece at the museum? She said, well, art is in the eyes of the beholder. At which point the 2 of us looked at each other and burst out laughing again. The other thing I remember about Stan is we were at the Dead Sea. It was hot. And people come from all over the world to the Dead Sea because it's so high in chemicals. They have this kind of muddy tar on the bottom of the lake, whatever you want to call it. And it's black and it's mucky, and it's been used for years as a treatment for psoriasis, where people would lie in the sun. They'd come from all over Europe and apply this stuff. So it was tar and sunlight was the treatment. And there we are looking around, and there's Stan. He's got this glob of tar all over his head. And I'm like, Stan, what in the world are you doing? He says, well, I don't know, but maybe it'll grow hair. So we laughed a lot, but I will say Stan had many other spectacular qualities. Number one is he was not shy. You're laughing, but he was not shy. He could walk up to anybody and start a conversation.
And he would.
And he would, and if there were nice-looking women, he would walk up quicker. And he never lacked self-confidence. He was also very, very smart. And he was good with a quip. And I know Sarah liked the fact that we could trade insults together. And it was pretty intense to try to keep up with Stan on the insults. But we tried. But the other thing was that he was a learned man. He had studied when my son wanted to look at buying a restaurant stand, actually took time and met us and went over the lease with us, line by line, giving advice. And we knew that because he was a self-made man and an astute business person as well as an attorney, that he knew what he was talking about. He was also very generous, despite the fact that he didn't like to spend money. Even at the end, he was worried about the cost of his care. I know that he was a generous donor to the causes he believed in. So that it's one thing to have money, it's another thing to use it for a good purpose. So I, frankly, am left with a hole in my life because we knew each other for almost 30 years. And it's unusual when you meet somebody on a trip and you stay friends that long. But that's a tribute to Stan and the kind of guy he was. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. That was beautiful. Love hearing the personal stories. If anyone else out there? And again, everyone just please introduce yourselves and say anything you want to add. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Barnett, and I am a tenant in 2001, Fillmore. And I'm a writer, and usually I have things prepared, so I'm not very good at ad-libbing, but I'll try. One of the great moments of my life was walking into the Starbucks on Fillmore 12 years ago. And I was looking for an office, and this young barista said, "Oh, you want to go down, there's a sign on the corner of Pine and Fillmore, and there's an office for rent." And I thought, whoa, great. And I walked in and I said, beautiful building, walked up and I said, this is it. And they said, well, here's the name of the landlord, call him up, called him up. And Stan actually said, I'll come over tomorrow or something like that. And this, from the minute I met him, he was the ultimate mensch, you could just tell. And I write quite a bit for a little newspaper called the New Fillmore, and I'm constantly writing about, I don't know if you know that area, the landlords there have been chasing out the small little retailers and stores and going for the big national and international fashion companies that pay. And so I'm writing story after story about greedy landlords and this and that and this and that. And then you have Stan. And Stan is the kind of guy that, life is ups and downs, and I've had my ups and downs. And when he'd come in and he'd knock on the door, and in his case, I would always answer the door. I wouldn't hide. And he'd come in and say, Chris, how are you doing? How's it going? I said, Stan. He said, I'm thinking about you, and I'm just wondering, and can I come in? I said, come on in, of course. And he had this warmth about him, genuine warmth, genuinely cared, and I'm thinking, ooh, I figured, my lease is going, the rent's going up. And when he did send you a rent notice, it was always with an apology, it was like $12 or something like that. And he just said, things are this and that, and I'd say, Stan, my God, you're so generous, I can't believe you even care. And he said, well, I've been through some things and I know what it's like, and you're trying to run a business. And he had this empathy and kindness and caring that you just don't find in landlords, let alone people today. So, and just many, many memories that I have, and hearing Harry and these great stories about him. And he's also the kind of guy that never talked, so many people are walking autobiographies telling you their whole life story and this and that. Stan did not throw it out there, and I had to pull it out of him to find out. I didn't know he was a lawyer. And then the great thing was we had a little Christmas party at the office, which has become quite a family of people there. And my bookkeeper came, And she went over and talked to Stan, and she came over, she said, "Ooh, who's he?" And she's an 83-year-old Texan. And she said, "Ooh, he's an interesting guy." I said, "Well, that's our landlord, that's Stan." And, "Oh, the guy that I write the check to." And she said, "Is he single?" And I said, "I don't know." And then we had heard that he had and then somebody said, "He's got a girlfriend. Is he a mom?" So that was, and then the other final thing was that when I moved in there in like 2007, Stan said, "You gotta go, there's a woman at the very end, she sort of does writing. You gotta go down and introduce yourself to her." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And she didn't have no name on the door, nothing on the thing. The Washington Post had their stealth West Coast bureau there, their investigative reporting bureau in that building for years. So I knock on her door and I said, this woman comes to it. It looks like she was living in there. She had a bicycle, she had all this kind of stuff. I said, "Hi," and I was right next door to her. I said, "I'm Chris Barnett, I'm a writer," and this and that. She said, "So?" And I, and I said, "I'm staying here with the Post." And she says, "Who told you that?" And I said, "I just heard." And she says, I said, "Well, maybe we can get together for a cup of coffee." She said, "I don't think so." Slam the door. Anyway, but I just want to say it's wonderful to be here. And Stan is a one-of-a-kind guy. And to listen to these Harry stories are amazing. And Sarah has been so kind to all of us. And I'm just grateful to be here. And we'll raise a toast to him.
Yes.
So,
Definitely.
all the best.
Thanks, Chris. It's amazing to hear our father's personality, his history, his character be revealed to us more today. So it's an amazing thing. Yeah, we have another contestant. Again, I promise you that we will be drinking and eating shortly.
No, not at all. Okay. Well, I entitled this "Stan the Man."
Michael, introduce yourself to me.
I'm sorry, yes. I'm Michael Weitz. I'm Carol Weitz's son. Boy, she looks great, doesn't she? And I'm married to Janice, who spoke previously. And we love Stan. So, here we go. You fought the good battle, put up a great fight. 91 years of living, you proved your might. Part of the Great Depression, you have witnessed so much. Great Depression, World War II vet, Holocaust, nuclear weapons, civil rights, man on the moon, internet, smartphones, and learned so many lessons. Lived his last years in his beloved East Bay, fiercely independent, didn't want help. He always got his way. Stan and actively managed his portfolio to the end. Keen mind, no dementia. Father Time was his friend. Big sports fan, Raiders, A's, Warriors, and Harry's alum, USC. Attended games with Harry. Father bonding worth the fee. 10 years ago, our mom, Carol, met Stan at APEC and soon became part of the family clan. 4th of July parties, Cabo San Lucas, endeared us to Stan. When cancer arrived, Sarah took the advocate role, became medically conversant, researching the protocols. Merkel cell skin cancer, exceedingly rare. She's searching the globe to find the best care.
Harry by his side, offering compassion and emotional support. The two of them side by side in a loving cavort. Carol and Betty, aka Thelma and Louise, provided Shabbos dinners and Sonoma retreats, living life spontaneously, never missing a beat. You will always be in my heart as you gave me a special gift as a lung cancer survivor, and we were both survivors. He gave me a Trojan shirt saying, "Fight on," and which provided such a lift. I still cherish that, and I think of Stan every time I put that on, and I wear it proudly. You love Frank Sinatra, and there's no better song that exemplifies your life than My Way. A few stanzas. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear. I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway, but much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all and stood tall and did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, when he has not, to say the things he truly feels, and not the words of those who kneels. And the record shows I took the blows and did it my way. That was Stan in my mind. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
And Jeff. I wasn't going to speak, but what the heck? There's some good Stan stories to be told, and I've got a couple myself. I'm Jeff Heyman, Sari's, I don't say wife, no, son. Stan's son-in-law and Harry's bro. And, I was just really, well, thanks for coming, of course. And I was really inspired by all the stories. And Harry had this long thing that he was going to give, and he gave it, and we were all talking about, we got to keep it short. You know what? Every second of that was so precious, and it went by like that. So thank you. Anyway, I've got a little story. So when I proposed to Sarah, I blew it. I really botched the whole thing, but that's not the story I'm here to tell. But I decided that I should go. Stan didn't know I had asked Sarah to marry me. And so I decided, he's a kind of old-fashioned guy. I should go over there and ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. So I said, hey, Stan, I'd like to come over and talk to you. He was like, yeah, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, I have some financial questions to talk to you about, because he was always offering advice on investments and things. So I went over, and I don't know why. I thought we were going to go into his apartment there in Emeryville. But he said, no, I'll come down. I'm like, oh my God, because I was going to spring this thing. He came, shuffling downstairs. He kind of walked slower in those days. Then he said, he wanted to go to Starbucks. So we walked across the plaza to Starbucks in Emeryville, and we're at a public table there, sharing this table with people, and I'm going, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And I think he took like 4 or 5 of the paper cups. So I said, Stan, I wanted to ask you some really important questions. I had some important, well, what? I said, well, finances. He goes, well, what kind of investments do you have? And I said, I have Vanguarders. That's very good. So very good. And they went and started going on and on. I said, Stan, I'm not here for that. I'm actually here to ask if I can marry your daughter's
Sari. And he looked at me and he said, you know, you're gonna have to eat chicken the rest of your life. This is true. Now, you guys might not know this story, but Sari is known for her, that's all she eats. So I can give as good as I can get. So I turned and I said, it's a good thing I do the cooking. So anyway, but then, so it's been chicken pretty much since we've been married. And one of the things I will really miss is we used to have Santa Claus over for Sunday dinners, and it was really nice. And the way he, just the way you treat Katie Bugs, our greyhound, was, and boy, I'll tell you, he could charm the dogs too. It was really amazing. Well, I'll miss those. And we used to have some really rip-roaring political discussions. Sarah would always be like, don't, whatever you do. But you know, we really enjoyed him. And actually, when he was in hospice, I came by sort of towards the end there, and he initiated one. He was like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, hey. But we had a pretty good discussion. So, you know, right up to the end there, he was standing there. We'll miss him. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm really glad you told that story about the chicken. We got to wrap this up soon, I think. So anyone who didn't get to say something, I apologize, but come grab me and Sari and a group of us later and share whatever memory you have, because we'd love to hear it. But we're just going to show a real quick, about 7.5-minute slideshow. Pictures of Dad and everybody. I will say, though, that during the political discussions between my dad and Jeff, just a real quick thing, if I was Dad sitting in the chair and Jeff was where my good buddy Marty is, and they'd be talking, Sari would be back here going to Jeff. All right, time for the slideshow.